of Day 3, which promises to offer another thought-provoking exploration of Indian English literature, especially the poetry. I invite once again our speaker, Dr. Jaydeep Sarangi, a scholar of repute, a translator, and a principal of New Alipore College, Calcutta, to the theme of this session, led by our distinguished speaker, Dr. Jaydeep Sarangi, is Trends to Contemporary Indian English Poetry, Text and Context. I would like to invite Dr. Mini Mori to stage to chair this session. I would like to invite Dr. Jaydeep sir. Thank you, sir. Without further ado, I invite Dr. Sarangi to the dais to begin with this session.
Good afternoon to all. I hope you will not sleep and you may find it drowsy, but a drowsy numbness is an inspiration, quote unquote drowsy numbness. Now in this session, I think will be just the opposite of the session we conducted last, I think day before yesterday, isn't it? So yesterday, sorry, how time is a matter of forgetting when you talk of poetry. But this session is just the opposite of that session, I think. Let's begin with something called the Gangotri of Indian writing in English. You know the Gangotri, from where the Ganga is originated. Okay. It's 1794. It's unlike many other languages in the world. Indian writing in English did not start with poetry. It started with Sir's obsession with or Sir's love affair with the travel narratives, the travels of Deen Muhammad. 1792, set the clock back, 1792, first time by an Indian wrote something in English. He crossed the Kalapani and he opened a restaurant in London, city of London, and later on he started practicing Oriental medicine. This is Deen Muhammad, the man from Patna, and he came out with a semi-biographical travel narrative. Why semi-autobiographical? Because all about his visions of colonial India and the colonizers. So this is the first time we get an insider's view in English written by an Indian, 1792. Hope you were born there, isn't it? Okay. But the first two writers, both of them came from Patna, Bihar, and Abdullah, and this 1792 the travels of Deen Muhammad. So if we talk of the origin of Indian writing in English, that goes to 1792 publication. Okay. It took another 34 years time to start with something called poetry. In the year 1809 saw the birth of two poets, and one of them you know, one of them you don't know, because our primary canon framers were the British. You all know Derozio, isn't it? Huh? You all know Derozio, the man who revolutionized Bengal and beyond in India. And he started a Bengal club which actually reformed the Bengali and so-called Indian society in the then time. In 1809 saw the birth of another person, Kashi Prasad Ghosh. We are divided in camps. Who actually wrote the first English poem by an Indian? We'll come to the crux of the matter because Derozio had a mixed parentage. He was not out and out an Indian. Okay. When Derozio was 18 years old, The first poem came out, The Harp of India, which is the first by an Indian, if you call within a question mark, whether we call Desrosiers as an Indian or not. That came out in 1827. Just 2 years later, out and out, an Indian came out with the first poem, that is by Kashi Prasad Ghosh, who is a Bengali and no foreign blood in him. So when we talk about, or even in NET examinations, there are alternatives who are the first out and out Indian. I think a couple of years back the question came, who was the first Indian English poet who was out and out an Indian? So the answer won't be Desrosiers, it would be Kashi Prasad Ghosh. Okay, so I deliberately mentioned it because without knowing your father, knowing your forefathers, we are nowhere. So we cannot come to the contemporary time without crossing a diachronic study of Indian poetry or Indian writing in English that we talk about. So 1827 saw the publication of Desrosiers' volume, and 1829 saw the volume by Kashi Prasad Ghosh. Okay, that began. Indians could write poetry, okay, in English, okay, which is essentially second language. Now it went on. We all know that Sarojini Naidu, I think many of you are familiar with Tarudat, Arudat. Both of them are very much good scholars of French, as well as substantially wrote on French literature as well as on English literature, poetry. The early part of Indian English poetry was imitative of the proto-romantics. Who are the proto-romantics? In a in history of literature, there is a term called precursors of the Romanticism. That means Gray, Burns, William Blake, all are the precursors of the Romantic movement. They are called also the proto-romantics. So earlier part of Indian poetry in English was imitative by nature. By imitation, you can use the word imitation in the Aristotelian term, a creative term, isn't it? But it went on, and we also have parallelly another form of Indian English poetry, another gharana with Swami Yogananda, Swami Vivekananda, then Sri Aurobindo, the spiritual tradition of Indian English poetry. Both met and received modernity in the hands of Rabindranath Tagore, who essentially a Bengali poet but wrote only one poem in English, that is the Christ. But most of his poems were translated from Bangla to English. So, and oftentimes the question comes, which is the only poem written by Rabindranath Tagore in English in your NET examination? Okay, that is the Christ. Okay, so my point is that Indian English poetry, if we talk of the early part of Indian English poetry, it was spiritual because Indians had a mind towards spirituality. Because Swami Yogananda, you must be familiar with the autobiography of a yogi, the famous book, the autobiography of a yogi. Swami Vivekananda, you all know, who actually announced the arrival of the Indians at the Chicago Parliament of the Religion, isn't it? And you all are aware of Sri Aurobindo, where you are heading for your trip, isn't it? Departmental trip to Sri Aurobindo. And Aurobindo's Savitri is not an epic poem, but it is the India in a nutshell, isn't it? A sense of the India in a nutshell. So spiritual tradition of Indian poetry in English, and which reached the modernity at the time of Tagore. But very interestingly, No one could write a good poem on Indian nonviolence movement or Indian ways of suppression to the British rule. That was the criticism that we received in during the pre-independence period. We have had already, by the time of Indian independence, good novels. You understand, 1930s was the time of novels, because we all know Mulkraj Anand has arrived, Raja Rao has arrived, R.K. Narayan is arriving very soon. So we have a big trio coming up, which will be shaping up Indian novels. Indian short story has already received a worldwide accolade. What was missing? T.P. Kailasham and Madhurs were experimenting drama form in different parts of India. But what was not there in proper sense of poetry? Poetry which can aesthetically be sound and internationally acclaimed. And by the stroke of the midnight, we all know we achieved our freedom. And Indian poetry in English originally started after Indian independence. That means from the 1950 onwards, we have had crossed 75 years Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. And within the period of 75 years, we are the destination. The world looks up for Indian English poetry to everything, because we need to write aesthetically satisfying poetry. We need a command over the language. We can write prose, we can write novel, we can write critical writings, but for poetry, that art comes with a baggage of two, three, four generations of English studies on your back. Okay, as we moved along from the Indian independence to the great Asian century that you and I belong to, even the US politics, the American election will be based on what? Considering the Silicon Valley, what the Silicon Valley thinks. Why Silicon Valley? Silicon Valley, the most part of the Silicon Valley is occupied by the mighty Indians that you and I take care of. Yeah, I may sound very much nativist this afternoon, but has to be this pride we achieved. I know, very interestingly, since the time of Indian independence, as I mentioned, no, Nissim Ezekiel in my previous talk, with Nissim Ezekiel, we started the gharana of poetry in 60s and early part of 70s. You'll be very surprised to know that literature cannot survive without a solid base of secondary material production. Shakespeare is still relevant because Shakespearean scholarship has a progressive growth across time. Who would have read Shakespeare if we don't consider the contemporary gaze at Shakespeare? The political Shakespeare, the recent book you are all know, we are familiar with, but how the generations have received Shakespeare, perceived Shakespeare, and looked at Shakespeare critically. Similarly, unless Indian English poetry got a good solid platform for critical analysis, nobody considered it as a solid platform. Now, very interestingly, if you think of that, no, in 50s and 60s or 70s, all our critical stuff were mostly taken from the Western parameters. You know, when we were in schools, if you don't know Nesfield, you are not a master of English. If you don't read Shakespeare, you are not a good student in English. That means you will have to quote scene after scene of Shakespeare. When we were school going, college going students, we had to remember Shakespeare, Act 1, Scene 1, Macbeth. Where shall we three meet again? Thunder, lightning, or in rain? Where the hurly-burly is done, battle is lost and won. That means scene after scene, you remember. I think your ULT teacher has already said that means the repetition and tuning with your ear skills, listening skills, you remember, and that remembrance will give you a sense of production or creativity at the end. My point is that 50s and 60s and 70s made a solid platform of Indian English criticism, starting with Alud Jankiram, Ezekiel, C.D. Narasimhaya, Professor Nayak, and many others who were the backbones of Indian scholarship developing, emerging. But remember, Indians have a very, or the Asians have a very interesting tendency. First, you will be recognized in the West. So one white-skinned people will say, white establishment will say, you are good. Indians will start saying, you are good, 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 celebrate, celebrate, celebrate. Same thing happened with Tagore. If you see the Gitanjali, who has written the preface, the great poet W.B. Yeats. And Tagore was explored, read, studied, critically examined by the West first, then the recognition came from home. Same with Amartya Sen, same with Abhijit Vinayak, all the Nobel laureates that we are associated with. Similarly, if you read and Google my name with all the great poets, you will find interviews. They are all claiming, I'm just giving, I have shared the interview with the head of the department, sir, with Jayanta Mahapatra. I took 3 interviews in an interval of 10 years, 10 years, 10 years gap. And I see how Jayantada says that Jaydeep was never viewed as a poet at all in the early part of my career. Only there were some white people who recognized, good people recognized me as a poet. What happened to untouchable Mulk Raj Anand? It was rejected by so many publishers, and later on Mulk Raj Anand became a wise man and got someone called M. Foster to write the preface, and immediately it was published. Understand? You need a preface or introduction by someone like Bill Ashcroft, someone like great scholars like Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, or someone like a great Leela Gandhi, isn't it? Then your book is endorsed that it is a magnanimous book. It is a book of magnanimity. The point is that we didn't have the knowledge and scholarship and confidence of our own. Think of the cinemas of 60s and 70s, all regional cinemas. If you have a character who has gone to study the doctor, that means MBB, FRCS, MRCP, either in Edinburgh or in London. When they come back with a coat and a tie. And this is a unique marker that we are copying from the British. Now think of someone coming back from England or Europe. They hardly wear a coat and a tie and a cigarette from taking from Europe. So our journey of insecurity to security, our journey from uh, doubting in the self to a confidence. This is possibly the celebration of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Okay. Now 50s, 60s and 70s still have a tendency. Suppose someone is working on Jayanta Mahapatra and a comparative study with suppose anyone from Keki and Darwala. Okay. And they start with the British scholarship first and come to the Indian scholarship later on. Hang on. We are a very confident Indian English criticism base. We also want to see Indian English criticism dominating in the European traditions, because that's why look at the first line, my crows are, read, crows are more musical than the nightingales chanting. Why the crows? If you read Jayanta Mahapatra's poems, Dawn at Puri, is it in your syllabus? Dawn at Puri, endless crow noises. And look at the crow, the color of the crow is black. Just the opposite of the color of the dove, isn't it, in the Eurocentric model? So my crow is more powerful than a dove symbol in the West. Understand? So now I think you can link up. Crow is more musical than the nightingales chanting. I'm a great fan of John Keats. I have seen where Keats was born. I have seen where Keats died in Rome, and I'm mad about Keats. But my nightingales are not. You have not seen nightingale, and sometimes teachers have not seen nightingale. But nightingale has been translated and transcommunicated. But see, our Indian contexts are more vibrant. Suppose a poem like Daffodil. You all have known. And if you ever see daffodil in Europe, you won't like to get back to it again. Okay. But Mr. Wordsworth, without glossing daffodil, why glossing? I say because it's a cultural translation. No student in Indian classroom in schools and colleges have seen daffodil. So Mr. Wordsworth should have glossed daffodil. So if I write a poem on one particular Indian flower, I will give that name a very regional name without glossing it to the world. No revenge for Mr. Wordsworth. I read Mr. Wordsworth, but it is my language and the scholarship I develop. I'm not going to gloss it. But very sadly, we are closing our all front doors, opening up the ventilators only in the colleges and universities because we are giving still priorities to the British tradition, American tradition, not giving tradition to our own scholarship. I propose in this afternoon there should be a complete paper on Indian English criticism. Without Indian English criticism, no Indian text can ever be analyzed appropriately, acceptably, critically in the context of you and I are engaged with. Now coming back to the crows. Okay, we're more frequent. Now 1970s is the time when lot of great vibrant poets came to the scenario. Jayanta Mahapatra at the age of 38, you are too young. You never know. You can become a great poet someday. He started writing very late in life, and the first book, 1971, Sayambara and other poems, Under the Orient by Keki and Daruwala, and 1975-76 by the time with the publications in all major places in the world, Jayanta Mahapatra, stole the prominence from, Mumbai, the metro city, to a small town called Kotak. And that ushered the democratization of Indian writing in English. No more Indian writing in English has a pocket. So the pocket center Indian English writing practice become fractured, and Indian English became a part of everybody's cup of tea. Jayanta Mahapatra started editing a very important journal called Chandrabhaga, and many writers came and were published, and he was very democratic. Lot of northeast writers, eastern region writers, all were published by Jayanta Mahapatra, and later on mentored them into good poetry. Not going to one particular poet in details, but my point is at this point of time, Jayanta Mahapatra was also editing another column poetry column of the great The Telegraph magazine. You are famous of the Telegraph newspaper, and they used to publish a poetry section, and Jayanta Mahapatra became the editor. And by Jayantada's introduction to that, coming from Cuttack, a small town became a microcosm of Indian English poetry. Okay, a man from physics knew the art of precision of literature, language choice, made a mastery of the art, and by the time 1976, he became famous personality in abroad. Why I call abroad? 1976, no Indian university has started Indian writing in English. Only under Commonwealth, Rajarao, Arkanarayan, the guide, okay, one, two texts like that, as if we are doing some sympathies to Indian writing in English. Hell with the Indian scholarship in the then time, because it's not a matter of sympathy; it's a matter of recognition to the proper thing. And if you would have been in that time, you would have gone to the your guide that I said I want to do PhD on Indian writing in English. Your guide would have said, why don't you take up a British subject or American subject? Because the then time the hierarchy was higher. Coming from Oxford as if he has 200 kilos of weight. Hell, my university is producing far better than anybody in the world. Okay, gone are the days. In there, they are all coming to IPPL. Are you know IPL? All are familiar with IPL? Okay. All will have to come in Chennai on 48 degrees in summer to earn their livelihood. Time has changed because recognition, so much audience, the market of cricket, all are who is dominant, who is powerful. India, 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 India. Nobody goes to count for playing county. In the then time, you had to be a Hampshire, Glamorgan, or your Kent, or Nottingham, Northamptonshire, and become a part of it. Things have changed because you and I, we are the inhabitants, dwellers of the great, great, great Asian century. Yes, I tell you, we are an empowered, enlightened, enkindled the world of knowledge. And look at the curiosity of the West to look up India as a parameter for everything. Now, very point is that I deliberately make an acrobatic statement because all of you should come out of a slumber. You see the world like Swami Vivekananda. You see the world like Aurobindo, like, of course, your Ambedkar, and you contribute to the world, even in Gandhiji, and from, of course, his experience in South Africa. And you see the world through your India, okay, through our own perspectives. My point is, by the time 1976, Jayanta Mahapatra was invited as a writers program in Iowa. Iowa was a great place of writers, and the first person who was invited is also Bengali, a poet. But in 76, Jayanta Mahapatra, first Indian English poet to be invited in Iowa. And 76 to 79, all great achievements of the world he owned. Adelaide Lit Fest, he was invited, and then he met with Eddie Hope. Are you familiar with Australian writing? Australian, great, great Australian poet Eddie Hope and his beautiful wife, according to Jayantada, as he met in Canberra. Okay. All are these personal touches are very vibrant, of course, yeah. 81, we all know the rise of Salman Rushdie's great novel and the revival of the post-colonial. The first time a book, mammoth book. But 80, early part of 80 saw another some important things. 1985, Kamala Das was selected as on almost, on the final round for the Nobel Prize. She missed the Nobel Prize by a whisker for summer in Kolkata in the year 1985. Almost she got it. Almost she got it, but by whisker she missed the Nobel Prize in 1985. She was on the final round for the Nobel Prize. So the women writings came into being with Kamala Das, confessional. You can write everything and anything, whatever you think. Sometimes, we live in an adult world. We do not want to express our desires. But you look into Kamala Das's poetry, there you will find everything and everything, the body and mind, you can share through the language of poetry. And Kamala Das's My Story. My Story is a semi-autobiographical book. Kamala Das first said it is an autobiography. Later on said it is a semi-autobiography. And the end of her life, she said it is not an autobiography. So yeah, we take the point semi-autobiography, and I recommend all of you, all women students, should read My Story because it is your story. It is Kamala Das's My Story. My Story is your story. Read more, amalgamate more, digest. Then you become a champion writer of India. Because writing is very lucrative. You understand, and it's an aroma you are born with. Okay. And 1980s also saw the rise of the diaspora. Indians who settled abroad, first generation diaspora writers pouring in from America, the European context, the UK, Australia, and they are even in Papua New Guinea. Satyendranandan and others, he became the vice chancellor later on, first Papua New Guinea University. But all started writing, first generation diaspora started writing poetry as well as different genres of writings. You know, why I'm saying this background to reach at 1990. I talk all this because how from a pocket it became a part of everybody's identity. So when English was an alien language or a second language, matter of ELT, but remember how we amalgamated English and made by our own language. It takes time to make it own. And unless you can make your own flesh, your own blood, it can't be transmuted into true poetry. It can be a repetitive or something else. So that took some time to reach. I propose, or it's been critics say, by the end of 1960, sorry, by the middle of 1970s, we achieved that, and we continued with that, and possibly now we are currently going through as one of its most visible and vibrant phases. You know, from being an unsure, questionable, and apologetic genre under the colonial rule to evolving a distinct idiom, identity, and niche for itself within global readership. Indian poetry in English today has effectively vernacularized the English language. Vernacularized the English language means it's a creative venture of the English language, which is an almost colloquial English language. It has come down to that. And subtly anglicize the country's bhashas through osmotic cultural diversity, linguistic plurality, and the polyphony of imagination. These the terms. How India is you and I. We have a rich culture, and had it been a kind of monolingual, monocultural context, you would have bored, isn't it? Everywhere from Gujarat to Bengal, Manipur to Kerala, Kerala to Kashmir, one language, one culture. Think of that time. It would bore you. You are so vibrant, you are so diverse, you are so open, which is unique, peerless in the world. Nobody can compete with you. That's why we have the epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and many, many, many myths. There are countries where there is no epic. They cannot write an epic poem. They have anything called myth and legend. For creation of myth, for creation of legend, you need thousand of years. Eddie Hope, the great Australian poet, says, in a poem called Australia, you can Google, Australia is a country, he is a national poet. Australia is a country, the womb is dry. The womb of myth is dry. Because if you talk of white Australia, settlers Australia, Australia who were taken on transportation to Australia because of offenses, that Australia is 300 to 350 years old. But we are not referring to the indigenous Australia. Okay, that is the Aborigines or the Maoris in New Zealand. My point is that we are never bored with cultures. If we are bored, just go out in 100 kilometers. You know, you have a different culture. You have a different language. So India will never bore you. India is a country you will not, see that there is not a mosaic in anywhere. In this context, in 1970s, there was an article by Professor Meenakshi Mukherjee. I hope all of you know the name because of his mammoth books like Reality and Realism and some others. And Meenakshi said that is the Indian writers were preoccupied with the anxiety of Indianness, how to present our Indian context. Think of Untouchable, think of Coolie, all are Indian. Kanthapura, Serpent and the Rope. Even first one part is Indian philosophy, other part tussle between Indian philosophy and the philosophy of the West. French, easiness is ease. What a philosophy. But look at the rich philosophy has been, or Arkan Ayan, Bhavani Bhattacharya's novels, all are redolent with the presentation of Indianness. The anxiety of Indianness, as expressed by Meenakshi Mukherjee in her article, Anxiety of Indianness in 1970s, is over. The scope is huge and, of course, unbound. The scope is unbound. Again, look at the title. That's why I have not given. My crow is sweeter than the doves singing. Okay, so relate the title. Read it in the way. The crow ad. Democratization has blurred pocket centralism in English poetry in India. English poetry is a pan-Indian affair now. It is not one pocket or something like some cities it can be practiced. Covering wide perspectives and gauges from different plural spaces. It is a sparkling images and symbols, style of its own it has developed, and words from the vernaculars are its resources. We all know English is a global language. We all know that English is a masculine language. We all understood in philology. Why masculine? Because of its flexibility. Wherever it went, look at the French vernacular in English. The influence of Latin on English, influence of world languages on English, because English customized all and incorporated all useful words and phrases from the local languages. And Indian English is also not static language. It will never die like some languages in the world. It is forever growing and forever plural, because every time it is taking new resources from from vernaculars of its own. That's why it is one of the creative languages, one of the most agile, active, vibrant languages of the world. That's why when you think of any plural society, English is used very creatively, isn't it? Very creatively. Very creative images, creative symbols, creative vernacular images come into English, and that become part of your repertoire or your own vocabulary, active vocabulary. It is not a dormant vocabulary in you. Now, in this context, nobody is Indian here. If we look into the interviews with all the great poets, they all refer to them because they are the soul makers of the world. Because English poets means they are the voracious readers. I refer to Jayanta Mahapatra again and again. Because, Jayanta Mahapatra's house, which is after his death, almost dilapidated. But if you ever would have visited his house at Tinkonia Bagicha, everywhere you would have found the books. What kind of books? The Atlas of New Zealand, the Encyclopedia of Australia, the Encyclopedia of Africa. All these books are very important because you should know all the cultures. Everything should be part of your diverse reading and different kinds of writers. What are they writing about? Let me start with this Latin American poet Nicanor Parar. And all major Indian English poets say they are influenced by the world poets like these. All refer to these. Nicanor Parar has a beautiful poem. You all know the Statue of Liberty? How many of you know Statue of Liberty? Statue of Liberty. Where is it? Where is it? Huh? I can't hear. New York. Okay. Now see, how many of you write poetry? One, two, three, four. Very good. India shines with you. Okay. We want to see you like this, a big poet. Okay. Now, see, let me read out a poem, line from Nicanor Parar that is about the Statue of Liberty, not about Statue of Liberty, about the Americans. Okay, listen to this poem. What is called poetry and how it is made out of the Statue of Liberty. America is a country. America is a country where liberty is a statue. Think. America is a country where liberty is statue. So America is a country you have no liberty to go. Understand? This is what the poets make. How a prose can be converted into poetry. If you want to be an enriched person, read, 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 read. You breathe and you see you are living and read. And then only read everything of the world, how they will make you mad. Unless you become mad, you cannot create something very special. But don't go back home and tell your parents that sir has suggested me to become mad, to become a great person in life. I tell madness means you're living and longing. You should be madly engaged with. And once you are madly engaged with, I tell you, you are the happiest person in the world. Okay. So embrace inner happiness. Nothing money cannot give you. Big, big degrees cannot give you. But your engagement will give you enormous, infinite happiness. So Nicanor Parra is a Chilean poet. Salvatore Quasimodo, another brilliant poet from Italy. If you can read translations, you will be mesmerized. I think all of you are brilliant students of arts. Did you listen to the Eighth Symphony of whom? Beethoven? Did you did you listen to Beethoven? Did you listen to Mozart? Because your ear should be, you should hop, dark. You should make your room half dark and listen to the Eighth Symphony of Beethoven. And then next day, you read the romantic poetry. Understand? So your ears should be busy, your nose should be busy, your eyes should be busy, your taste organs should be busy, your tactile sensibilities should be busy. You read John Keats's Ode to Nightingale, and all your sensory organs will be busy. You will listen to the nightingale, you will see the purple color, brewing color of the wine. You can taste that wine, cold wine, and your touch, and you will feel You are an enriched soul. Lorca, Garcia Lorca, another mesmerizing soul from Spain, of course. Then two diplomat poets. We all talk about cricket, football, and everything. Do you know Pablo Neruda, after winning the Nobel Prize, when he went back to Santiago, Chile, 1 lakh people attended to listen to his poetry. This is what poetry, and possibly forever, the best poet ever born, one of the best poets ever born is Pablo Neruda. It's not my comment. The poet of the century, 100 years of 1900 to 2000, the poet of the century, Pablo Neruda, after winning the Nobel Prize, when he was received at Santiago Stadium, football stadium, 1 lakh people listened to the poetry of Pablo Neruda, Ici Nigra, the great poetry. Now, why poetry is these madness? Because when we were, the school going, sorry, college students, we had a dream that we will read Neruda in original. So we were madly into Spanish course, learned Spanish, read Isa Nigra, original Pablo Neruda in Spanish, and our life's manzil is reached. This should be. This should be the engagement. This should be because reading Neruda is rare, is an act, is a mission because you are reading something which is soulful. You listen to music, all of you listen to music, but some music you want to fall back to it again and again. Like Neruda, reading Neruda in the evening on the banks of a ruins, because Neruda is at his best when he describes the ruins of a civilization, ruins of the past. Neruda is mesmerizing. Neruda is will help you in the days of stress. Neruda will help you when you are enjoying the world. Okay, I recommend all of you to learn Spanish and read Neruda in original and become a changed person. Both Sepphoris, Greek poet, and Neruda were diplomats as well. They were expelled, very vocal, very turbulent, and very much cyclonic in their talks. And Octavia Paz, again a Latin American poet, Latin American mysticism, and of course you all know the kind of mysticism that the Latin American writers write about, engage about, read them, and of course you are an important thing that you are not missing out in life. I'm not going in details. This is an entire book of recently my book come out in Sahitya Academy. Of course, some other time we'll be discussing maybe 7, 8 lectures from the book. I keep the book from this. This is, people say, one of the iconic anthologies because first time the anthology takes 20 poets, 10 poems by each and their views. And this is the last transmission with Jayanta Mahapatra and K.K. Darwala. I have in my message, the last word he messaged, love, after seeing the book. So these are the things you get, and these are the things you keep at heart, and you transmit year after year you live. Similarly, Keki has also left, and this is the book we'll talk about some other day. But these 20 iconic contemporary poets that we considered, we are enriched to consider these in this book. First one is, don't forget, and all are very much soul makers. All can transform you. All can transform you towards a better soul spaces. Adil Jusawala, not far away, Mumbai living, Parsi community. Anita Nahal, you know her husband. Who is her husband? Sorry, you know her father. Sorry, very sorry. Chaman Nahal, who wrote the very great book Azadi. Azadi, Chaman Nahal's great Broken Partition, novel and partition. Chaman Nahal's daughter Anita Nahal now stays in America. Arundhati Subramaniam. I think every woman will rise in love. I hate to say fall in love. Why should I fall in love? I will always rise in love. So All girl students, I recommend Arundhati Subramaniam, the champion poet of now lives between Coimbatore and Mumbai. Her house is in Coimbatore and Mumbai. And listening to Arundhati as a poet, I would recommend your HOD to bring some real life authors to the classroom that they will touch, feel, and later on they will be mesmerized and start working on them. Because, you should live, and because our association, look at our association, we lived with Vibhupadi, Jayanta Mahapatra, everybody, and we can, we say we have reached our manzil, not as a professor, but as a man, because we are a different person. That's why we feel ourselves like that. So your interactions, cordial introductions with Arundhati will hypnotize you. I tell you, it will be magical. You need some magic to fall back on in your life. Meeting with Arundhati will be a magical one. Ashwini Kumar, easily available, Mumbai-based poet, Professor TIS, Tata Institute of Social Science, mesmerizing speaker, one fly to here. Bashabi Fraser, Bengal, Kolkata born, now settled in Scotland, one of the dazzling diasporic poets. Next person, I have great fascination for him, and he is a psychological poet at his best. I will discuss him specially. Vibhu Padhi, unforgettable. Jayanta Mahapatra, I have already referred to, and of course, a poet, one of the best poets of contemporary times, Tabish Kher, from Bihar, settled in Denmark, another big diasporic writer. Usha Akela, Indian born, Kerala born, now US settled diasporic writer. Yogesh Patel, one of the big giant poets in London now, but Indian born. K. Sachidanandan, K. Srilata, Keki Daruwala, Lakshmi Kannan, Mamang Dai, from Northeast, Nabina Das, again Northeast, Ravina Sangam, again Northeast, Shangjukta Das Gupta from Kolkata, Smita Agarwal from Allahabad, Sudeep Sen from, of course, New Delhi. I'm tempted to give you a few lines I want to read from Arundhati Subramaniam's poem Mitti. What is the title? Mitti. Look, this is the strength we achieved. No English poet can ever give a title Mitti. Okay, now this is the richness of my vernacular. All reminders of the anthem of much we are made, except when June clouds capsize over an Arabian sea and a sleeping city awakens to an ache too singular, and a slope of matter meets a sleek lunatic wetness, mitti, just that, nothing else will do. One of the important facets of, now I will talk about some categories into our talk today, the myth making. Again, you know Shelley as a myth maker possibly you made in your graduation, isn't it? Because the British myth and most of the myth used in the British literature are from Latin or the Greek myth, isn't it? Italian myth. Similarly, but India is a rich country with myths. Indian English poetry is at its best when it delves into the myths of the land and its people. Our poets are blessed to have numerous cultures, languages, and myths of their languages. They are never bored with one culture, one language. Poetry as explorations of Indian myths. This is one of the points that I am going to hint at today. With her rich Tamil roots and her vibrant links with other Indian cultures, Lakshmi Kannan, a big name in Indian English poetry scene from Tamil Nadu, now based in Delhi, breathes a confluence of histories and traditions through an idiom that is her own. Look at the title of the collection. Look at the title of the collection. What is the title of the collection? The dedication to river. Okay. Now, it is a total Indian custom of Nadi Stuti. If you ever go to Varanasi in the evening, in the Nadi Ghat, in the ghats of Varanasi, the Nadi Stuti takes place. And look at the richness of the poet, that she has taken up this and made the entire collection as Nadi Stuti. Okay, an Indian myth cultivation of through the cult of Indian myths. Okay, Lakshmi Kannan, deeply rooted in the myths of India, Lakshmi describes Indus Valley, Indus, the river Sindhu, to significant deities of Parvati, as the dwelling place of Parvati is near the river Indus. Indian sacred scriptures, gods, the nocturnal experiences as described in the poem is rich with extraordinary poetic embellishments and Indian imagination of female snake gods, some human snake forms. You know, snake gods, snake forms, and the human snake forms are very much in Indian ancient books, isn't it? Think of the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and all texts. And Nadistuti describes all these myths in details. Okay, so reading Nadistuti is not a reading of one poem, you are reading India. India, okay. Another big champion poet from Kerala, Kerala Gopi Kuttur, Krishna and other poems. Gopi Kuttur is not the land from Krishna, but Krishna is an Indian god, a blue Indian god. Krishna is a blue Indian god, and you all have a very important destination for Krishna, as we all know. You know where Dwarka is in Dwarka. But Krishna, in this particular collection by Gopi Kuttur, Krishna and other poems, he entirely describes the cult of Krishna and made Krishna almost a home god with whom he can talk. And when he is taking a flat somewhere, he is first putting the Krishna figure first and then entering into the home. Okay. Now look how the award-winning poet Kapi Kuttur started writing poetry at the age of 17. For him, a good poem is one that enters one's soul, makes it mark there, and continues to haunt the reader. There are, of course, many ways to enter, to touch one's mind or soul with beauty, with love, with statement, with imagery, with mystery, with surprise, and so much more. Krishna had a deep impression on the poet as a handsome lover, the calm, smiling, perfect blue Lord. Look at the poem we quote. When we came home, we we hug him on the wall. We hug him on the wall as if the photo is there on the wall and we are hugging the wall. We are hugging the photo as well. For years he was not found, and one day after the property partition, I found him again. After the property partition, we found him. My point is, we can write with anything and everything. That is the capacity, and you and I have built up. Okay. The poetry of the mind, another important issue, how to describe your mind. We talked about myths of India. Now we will talk about the psychology of man. And Bibhupadhi is someone who should be studied in psychology, because he also has poems on the body spaces. You know, we all, when we talk, we come to a particular position of a body. You know, knowing who the gender is. You know, we know where. And he has poems on how that body positions. So my point is that how the psychology goes into the making and the production of the beautiful. Okay, and that's why possibly John Keats says, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. And poetry, through poetry, you can achieve beauty and truth both. A seasoned poet with 8 collections now. But here we'll talk about one collection, a friendship with time. I think nobody can make it. Impossible to make a friendship with time. Can you? Can anyone make friendship with time? Friend will ditch you. But don't complain your friend lover. That means time, isn't it? He cannot rest until he translates whatever moves him into poems. For Padhi, anything that agitates, consoles, ignites, uplifts, electrifies, and liberates constitutes poetry. Bibu Padhi, very sadly, he is in the textbook of class 7 and 8 in some part of England, but how many of our universities studied Vibhupati? We fought in my state. There are 3 universities. We included Vibhupadi, and some people are working on Manipadi. In my last session, I said you should not be producing dry scholarship. We don't need dry scholarship. We need activism from you. Get it done. Done means done. Otherwise, our Indian scholarship will not get things done for you. Okay, we are an activist, to pan-Indian activist, to implement change and change for good and giving every good to all. He is a poet who enters into the home of thoughts unbidden without being ringing the doorbell. He will not call you on the doorbell, but he will enter into it. Because psychology, in through psychology, it can enter any time and every time. Readers take a trip down memory lane and relive with old moments again. Again, in another poet, I tell you, he will never attend a conference. If you ask Vibhupati, he will never attend a conference. He will never go for any award ceremonies. He will never go. He was invited to very, very big places. He wouldn't say no. A patient of migraine, terrible patient of migraine, possibly days after days, he will not speak to his wife. Okay, Minudi. Okay, even to his sons. Okay, but what qualitative poetry, what poetry can do, what is the magic of poetry? Read Vibhupadi. Read Vibhupadi. To spin a thought swing waiting is a kind of suspended animation. It is a stock currency of life. We wait for the rains before we can plow. Poet Vibhupadi universalizes the state of waiting. This is the time I wait for throughout the year, for sleep, further sleep, an ordinary day. Some things keep happening in poet's mind. Padi lives through the pain and waits for rain to restore ease faithfully. I am enclosed by the superstitious safety of my home, and I wish I were out in the rains. Mid-July rains. Next, third point, from mind to identity. Poetry, you can say in our last talk we were discussing about autobiography as an identity. But think of how poetry can be an act or performance of your identity. Rabines Angam, the Manipuri writer, writes in Manipuri as well as, because our classroom is not limited in Kolkata or Odisha or Kerala. I will present you a pan-Indian parameter, unless that I am a failure as a communicator. Because we are Indians, we are in multitudes, we are not belonging to any one place. All places are my places. So here is my beautiful Northeast. in front of you. Time's Crossroads, The Desire of Roots, another very good poet of a different tradition. A poem for mother. Angam writes, Mother who gave birth to me, to be a man, how I hated leaving home 10 years ago. Now these hills have grown in on me. I turn out to be a small man with small dreams, living a small life. Don't read, I know. The first part, how many of you can write? If you can really spell it out, first part, I will talk to my friend Kedisco and say, she or he has spelled your name correctly. T. Kedisco. Very easy to say. T. Kedisco. And Kedisco is a mesmerizing woman poet. Oh, and she has mesmerizing poems on, tea poems. T-A-T. Cadesco, look, don't forget Cadesco. Cadesco is a female poet, academic writer, educator. She advocates the revival of indigenous Naga textiles and women's narratives. Her poems are on textiles and narratives of women. T. Cadesco's poems Precas where it hurts most, in the deep conflicts of experiences stocked into the storage until called silence. So elegant the zebra. Some poems leave us with a laugh at the caged reality of dreams come true. My rivers torn from their riverbeds and cast out to run rampant through the frightened forest, filling into the fringed coherence. The Naga Republic. Now, I'll discuss two poets now who you want to fall back on. What is love? Love is a thing to whom you want to return again and again. Here are some poets I will be discussing. They will, like friendly girls who are sitting in front of me, how you mob, how you prepare your room, how you stitch, how you make your home, and here are poets how purely, delicately, without being allowed or hidden, describe your domestic chores of living. I tell you, they are the soul makers. For my girl students, we opened A Blur of Woman, recently published by Bushudhara Roy. See, the Indian poetry at its best, Vashudhara says in the poem called Dukho, there is no alignment, just the weather. There is no alignment, just the weather. Weather is Dukha. Dukha means sorrow, sorrow, sorrow. Huh? There is no alignment, just the weather. As we whisker from one page to another page, the collection we get into the sunshine of the heart. It takes no time to get our bearings in full. Bashudhara writes and expresses feelings fiercely, tenderly, honestly, and contemplatively. Let me read out 3 lines from Bashudhara's Beyond Mourning. I'm not giving up this light. I'm not giving up this light. Look, I just scissored your coat, my last truce with light. Scissoring the coat because home economics, preparation of food because what the women are engaged to it and they are presenting their world of truth to the world. How beautifully. From Basudhara, Mamangdai, another northeast, but I am putting another name, small towns and rivers. In most of the universities in PG, this poem is the text poem. If you survey Indian universities, most of the universities, small towns and the rivers. Small towns always remind me of death because you may be a towering personality, but the end is the small from province from where you were born, you shaped your life. My hometown lies calmly amidst the trees. It is always the same, in summer and winter, with the dust flying or the wind howling down the gorge. In small towns by the river, we all want to walk with the gods. I'm not going into the details of great Mamangdai. Again, coming to Vasudhara because we are talking the same thing. Her liberal feminism. Within a liberal democracy to enact socialism through poetry, that is not a manifesto or slogan. Generally, there is a tendency to brand women's writing as confessional, isn't it? General tendency to brand women's writing as writing of biology or writing out of feminism. But Vasudhara doesn't belong to that group. She is not, sorry, not, is it not net, read not, confessional or half confessional. Or, sorry, a firm believer in the therapeutic power of verse, Vasudhara is one of those rare poets for whom our eager ear waits. Writing is magic. Vasudhara is gifted with. So Dirogio, who started Indian poetry in English, to Vasudhara, Indian English poetry has walked a long way. Vasudhara creates a soul space, letting us know how she walks into poetry through failures and success, gaze from other wisdom. The title of this collection, A Blur of a Woman, smells political. Blur of a woman, a blur of a woman, as if political. Her descriptions of domestic chores are vivid and honest. Suppose, look, a child's pocket be emptied of pebbles. Each day, broken glass has to be swept aside, loose threads cut, nails pared. Poetry for Vasudhara, like Pablo Neruda, is about the truth of a moment. This is the book picture. What else is poetry? She forgets how many laws she has upheld or how many goodbyes she has said. Think for some time how many goodbyes you all have said in your life. Imagine a 9-year star whose wholeness could have been a forest speaking to an earth bare body, now scissored willfully into rags, each random rag assigned to task to hatch. How I give myself away. Another person in this category is Smita Sahgal from Kerala, based in Delhi. Look at the title of the collection, How Women Become Poems and Malabar. Malabar, I hope, is not far away from here. So, how women become poems in Malabar. Smita writes, in the shadows of her womb quivers last of the dynasty, the one who never forgot to gather verses in the summer of exile. From Malabar to Georgetown or Port of Spain to Kabul, poetry is the only language she trusts. And the poem Mahalaya. Do you know Mahalaya? When the Durges, goddess Durga arrives, that arrival is called Mahalaya. That is from Pitri Paksha to Matri Paksha. That is the our own mythological tradition. In the tenor voice of yours, you ask, why hadn't I let you know I am coming? I know I am home. I know I am home. You know, many writers are engaged with the rock carves or the beautiful sun temple at the Konaraka. And there are so many writers who write on the Konaraka. writes in stone, forgotten Kalingo kings, carved spells of mystic light piercing airy cliff through the ancient stones where the moon retrieves a spectral embrace by each curve of the wheels, all lighted. I will take just 1 or 2 minutes, 2, 3 minutes to conclude. The findings are, even though the Indian poetry in English is going through its healthiest and the richest phase, so far it needs an able and discursive body of critical discourse to sustain in serious attention as a genre. It needs to be taught more enthusiastically in literature classes for its full potential to be examined and sensitized. As I consider criticism as both art and activism, I propose to critically engage with poetry is to offer to it good health and sustainability. The rich mosaic of IEP is one of the most vibrant genres of the world now. Indian English poets are asked to guest edit English poetry journals, major English poetry journals of the world. Indian English poets have grown with tremendous confidence and command over English. They can really play with English. They can really play with English. That's why the magic, mesmerizing threads are being created. School and college goers are writing wonderfully powerful poetry in English. So what I end with that we are possibly in a state of blessed state of creative excellence with the roots we have, with the systems we have, with the power of knowledge and the baggage, generations of English studies on our back, we can really create the maximum and we can really mesmerize the world through the magical power that we have. I don't know how many of you really write poetry. I want you to raise your hands who write poetry. Oh, good numbers. Very good. Who will read? I listen to you. Who have? Yeah, sure. And we'll go to question answer after this reading. Yeah.
1 to 5. Let's all gather and count 5. Let's all pray for the humankind. 1.
You come here. Oh, sure. And use the mic. Use the mic.
1 to 5. Let's all gather and count 5. Let's all pray for the humankind. 1. We will count. The world will stand for no war, and all would wear a white shawl. Tribute to the departed soul. None will die for greed of those. 2. We will count. Let's stand for human rights. There would be no difference for mites. Ending this everlasting fights. Hugs and kiss the same humankind. 3. We will count. Stand there every thee, and the brightest future we will see. Till the night we will stand and pray for the better human end. 4. We will count. Let's all leave our sour. Let's all now to the Almighty God. Our religions, the complement of our own, join hands for the unity of our own. 5. We will count, and everyone will dive to the deepest ocean for self-help, and will find the treasures of own, and make the pearls of everyone's own. Let us all gather and count 5. Let us all pray for the humankind. Thank you.
This, volunteer. Good.
So the name of my poetry is Poet and Poetry. Come to me as a poem on the empty sheet of my life. I will adorn the gathering with my words, and will become a poet and make you mine. In this changing world, to the winds of betrayal, I will add colors of our love, won't ever make promises of not separating, but as pen and paper we will always remain together. Keep smiling like this, and my life shall pass with describing your beauty. Even the ink of my pen will run out, still I won't be able to express your beauty. Come to me as a poem on the empty sheet of my life. I will become a poet and make you mine. All the nights that you spent without me, I will repay all that debts now. Thank you.
Anyone?
My poem is about, the title is Fear. A man with scythe approaches me, wide-eyed and tired I run. He bares his teeth and laughs at me. I gasp, I huff, I am done. This laughter filling me with dread claws at my barely beating heart, and all I heard and saw and read is crumbling, slowly falling apart. I ran like lightning through the sky, but he kept closing in on me. I could not comprehend, oh, why. He seeks my soul so restlessly. I never knew what fear could do to a man with nothing to fear. But now I know, and I do rue, that my last breaths will be here. All at once I stopped to run, for my heart felt no more fear. My mind and heart were all but one, that my life seemed so, so dear. Thank you.
Any question? Should I? No. You will read. Good. Number of poets. We'll have a separate session. Sir, it is an Hindi point. बोलो बोलो कोई बात नहीं. Poem बोलने का poem poetry नहीं.
So hello everyone. I am Sachin. So I have come here to the stage just to support those fellows who are afraid to express their love. So if you love someone, just say it. अगर अगर तुम कह दो बगैर मेरे नहीं गुजारा तो मैं तुम्हारा, और इस पे कोई मबनी कोई इशारा तो मैं तुम्हारा, और तुम अपनी शर्तों पर खेल खेलो, कि तुम अपनी शर्तों पर खेल खेलो, मैं चाहे जैसे लगाऊं बाजी, अगर मैं जीता तो तुम हो मेरे, कि अगर मैं जीता तो तुम हो मेरे, अगर मैं हारा तो मैं तुम्हारा, और तुम्हारा आशिक, तुम्हारा मुखलिस, तुम्हारा साथी, तुम्हारा अपना, रहे ना इनमें से कोई दुनिया में जब तुम्हारा, तो मैं तुम्हारा, और तुम्हारा होने के इस फैसले को मैं अपनी किस्मत पर छोड़ता हूं, कि तुम्हारा होने के इस फैसले को मैं अपनी किस्मत पर छोड़ता हूं, अगर मुकद्दर का कभी जो टूटे सितारा तो मैं तुम्हारा, और ये तुझ पे ताबीजें कर रहे हैं, कि तुझ पे ताबीजें कर रहे हैं और तुझे पाने के हैं वजीफे, अगर तमन्नाएं छोड़ो एक जो कर लो इस्तिखारा तो मैं तुम्हारा, तो मैं तुम्हारा. थैंक यू.
Thank you very much, sir, for such an informative session. In fact, interestingly, Gopi Kutur sir was here some time back, and we had a very long session of his recitations. Yeah, so at the same place he was here a year back, last year. Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. The session is open for questions and answers, so please.
Any questions? Please. Time to disperse. Quick questions, quick. They are convinced about your presentation. So all will be writing poems.
Thank you, Dr. Sarangi, for your insightful and deeply moving presentation. The conversations today have truly deepened our understanding of contemporary Indian English poetry, its context, and its powerful resonance in our cultural landscape. With that, we conclude this session. On behalf of everyone present, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Jaydeep Sarangi for his enlightening talk. Thank you, sir.